Hello YouTube, this is Asatsu5 and today I'm reviewing And a Bottle of Rum, the history of the New World in 10 cocktails. By far one of my favorite history books I've bought. I'm sure there's some good history books that I haven't bought and read, but to tell you how much I like this book, I have multiple copies of this book. I have duplicate copies of this book. I have 2 paperback and 1 audio. And the only other book that I have duplicates of is the Bible. I have it in ESV, NIV, King James, and that's not including the Gideon Bibles. But this book, I have 3 copies of it, which doesn't seem like a lot, but keep in mind that, why do I need 2 paperbacks and the audio? I'll explain that later. Well, I'll explain the 2 paperbacks real quick. I bought this book because I was interested in rum and history. Rum happens to be my favorite spirit, and I love history. And, I'm kind of a pirate geek, and more on that later. So I always enjoyed the history of guns, the history of knives, the history of alcohol, the history of marijuana and cocaine and heroin, history of vice. I just love history. But, those things are interesting because there's a lot of drama and controversial things that surround it. There's usually violence that surround it. There's usually, violence. There's usually some sort of historical aspect that would make for a great movie if people would take the time to research the material and put it in movie format. Some really crazy stuff. But, And a Bottle of Rum, one of my favorite history books, I bought it, and my plan was to read this while I was at the beach fishing. I usually fish with a big, 15-foot rod off the surf. We paddle the line out, past the second sandbar, drop the line over, catch a wave back. And then we just sit under the canopy and talk, hang out. And, if there's more than one of us over there that can pay attention to the tips of the rods, to see if the rod's swaying back and forth, the other person can take their eyes off the rods and read a book. And you can, just kind of sit there and chill. It's a very passive way of fishing, even more so than regular fishing. But I planned on reading this at the beach, took it to the beach, left it in the bait camp, went home, was like, oh, where's my book? I tore my room all to pieces, and then I was like, oh, I must have lost it. So I bought the second copy. Then the next time I went to the beach, I found my original copy. And then I am extremely, extremely dyslexic, really bad, and possibly ADHD, but I refuse to take Ritalin because I despise Ritalin. And I was on it for a while, and I did better in school, but I didn't like how it made me feel. And then when I quit Ritalin, it really messed me up, because I quit it cold turkey. Quitting amphetamines cold turkey, not fun. But anyways, I was really struggling reading this book because there was terminology that I wasn't necessarily familiar with. So when I saw this new vocabulary, I wasn't sure how it was pronounced, or because really when I read shapes of words for the most part. And if I'm not familiar with the spelling or whatever, it just messes me up. It trips me up. So there's some cool information in this book, like how before pot stills and stuff, how people used to distill spirits using ice or using freezing temperatures. People would set fermented mash out or whatever, and let it freeze overnight, scoop the ice out. There we go, you have pure spirit, or somewhat pure spirit, in the container that was frozen. Because alcohol doesn't freeze at the same temperature as water. Water freezes first, you take the ice out, there you go, you got a spirit. And there was even a video on YouTube of this guy making Applejack. And Applejack is a apple-based spirit, you make it from apple juice. And he uses his freezer in his kitchen to make a spirit. And he says it's very, very harsh. He says, well, He says if you're only supposed to drink a little bit of it at a time, because if you don't, it'll give you a nasty hangover. I can't relate because I've never had a hangover before. I don't know what a hangover feels like. I guess I'm lucky. Um, but anyways, they talk about that. They talk about the rum triangle. They talk about the Revolutionary War, 19th century, 20th century. Um, that they talk about pirates in here. And keep in mind, pirates really didn't have a lot of access to rum. I'm not saying it's impossible for a pirate to get a rum drink, but once they became pirates, they weren't allowed really on British-controlled islands or land. And so they're probably stealing the liquor. And they could probably steal it from the British, but they also probably stole a lot from the Spanish. Spanish had sherry. Spanish had wine, brandy. And, so rum, there was kind of a time gap where the golden age of piracy was too early before rum, as I understand it. And then towards the end of it, really the golden age of piracy starts at the end of privateers. Captain Morgan wasn't a pirate, he was a privateer. But pirates kind of started a little bit before rum became popular. And so there's other things. They talk about tiki culture, which was the one subject I wanted to read about or listen about on the airplane on my way to Maui, because everybody associates tikis with Hawaii. You're like, hey, if I go to Hawaii, I want to get a tiki drink. And they talk about tiki cocktails and the tiki culture, like Trail Vic's, I think it's Don the Beachcomber or Dan the Beachcomber. They talk about that, and you learn that tiki culture did not originate in Hawaii. In fact, it was imported over there, I think, to actually boost Hawaii's tourism, which that's an oversimplification. But basically, tiki culture, tiki cocktails did not originate in Hawaii. They were just inspired by Hawaii and tropical areas in general. You learn about grog. You learn about the British Navy's relationship with rum. And probably one of the coolest section of this book. Let's see if I can find it. And you also learn about Ernest Hemingway in Cuba and his alcoholism. But they have a thumbnail guide to rum. You don't know if you can read that. I don't know if it's mirrored or whatever. But he basically goes by and talks about his favorite legitimate rums. He's not talking about spiced rum like Captain Morgan. I don't even think he mentions Bacardi in here. I like Bacardi Oakhart, but Bacardi, and they do have some premium rums, but generally Bacardi is kind of on the cheaper side of things. But he goes by and lists his favorite rums, and he's actually been like a judge at a rum competition or something. He's tasted a lot of rum, and he's drank a lot of rum. And I was pleased to see that one of my first rum bottles I've ever bought, El Dorado, one of my first sipping rums, was on the list. So I'm not going to read the little blurb that has with El Dorado, but El Dorado was the first bottle, the first full-size bottle of rum I ever bought. It was also the first drink of any kind that I had a little bit too much of, but I was safe. Remember that, And I'm not encouraging drunkenness. To me, drunkenness is gluttony of alcohol, and I don't drink for that. I drink to get a flavor that I generally won't get with any other drink. And keep in mind, I can go a year without drinking. Let's just say the 4th of July week, I'm on vacation, might have a few drinks. And then when I get back from 4th of July, I can pretty much go until the next 4th of July without drinking. And it's funny, when I get my wellness check, they ask, do you drink? It's yes and no, so I put yes, and they say, how many times a week do you drink? It's like, well, I can't answer this question because I don't drink on a weekly basis. And my doctor was like, you really shouldn't put that you drink. You should really just put no. This question isn't for you. And another cool section of this, let's see if I can find it, is when it's cocktail time. And he has rum-specific cocktails. Like, that's pretty much the rest of the book filled with mixology. He has that acknowledgement in there. So that is the mixology section. And bibliography, he cites his sources. And you know what's the really interesting thing? Keep in mind that the Caribbean, the British-controlled Caribbean, was also being brutalized by the British Crown, I guess you can say. They suffered from taxation without representation, but they didn't join America's Revolutionary War. Why was that? This book explains why the Caribbean did not join what we now call the United States in the fight for freedom, and they just couldn't swing it. They needed Britain, and if they thought that the U.S. could win, they might have joined, but they couldn't risk their security due to some what should be obvious reasons. And I don't want to read the book to you or give you all the information, but pretty much the Caribbean would like to join the American Revolution, but they didn't have the ability to, if that makes any sense. I highly recommend this book. It talks from the early days where rum was known as Kill Devil because it was very harsh, very fiery, and it was the cheapest thing you can buy. They talk about molasses, rum agricole, prohibition. This is like my second time trying to film this video, so I don't know if I'm repeating myself. They talk about the trade embargo with Cuba. Some very interesting stuff. And it's a relatively cheap book. Original price US was $14.95. I bought the audio version. I can't remember how much it cost. But like I said, I'm extremely dyslexic. I really need the audio version to really appreciate the book. But the paperback comes with the mixology section. And so that's it. That's the review. I have 2 copies of it paperback, 1 in audiobook. And I am very pleased with my purchase of this book. So that's it. I'm a Satsu 5, and I'm out.